Arizona grand jurors wanted to indict Trump. Prosecutors urged them not to. Nice. Members of the grand jury in Arizona that indicted 18 allies of Donald Trump earlier this year for their alleged roles in attempting to overturn the 2020 election had also expressed interest in charging Donald Trump. The interest was strong enough that it prompted the state's lead prosecutor to request the grand jury not indict them and give a PowerPoint presentation to explain his reasoning. That's nice. Secret grand jury proceedings led to charge against 18 others, including Rudy Giuliani. Prosecutors cited two primary reasons why the grand jury should not charge Trump: a lack of evidence and a U.S. Justice Department policy that they believe would hamper charges against a former president. It is possible that this was being done for legitimate procedural reasons, but in all likelihood, they probably just really didn't want to open up the can of worms. I don't know what else there is to be said about it. This is more interesting. I've talked about this a little bit before, but not as much as I should. So there's a plan right now to, guys, you're not going to believe it, the Republicans want to overturn our democratic process again. In Georgia, there is a cabal, and that is the correct term, of election deniers who are working at the state level, who are planning to undo a Blorgia if it ends up happening. At his rally last Saturday night, Donald Trump praised three members of the Georgia State Election Board, calling them pit bulls fighting for honesty, transparency, and victory. Trump lavished praise and attention on these members of the obscure state agency by name. This odd exchange raised more than a few eyebrows. Yeah, it actually is really weird for a campaigning president to call out and praise by name members of a state election board in a purple state. You know, that actually is very weird. The state election board is a nonpartisan agency. It's not supposed to be pro-Republican or Democrat. These should be nameless bureaucrats tirelessly working to secure our democracy. Janice Johnson, Rick Jaffares, and Janelle King refused to acknowledge that Joe Biden won Georgia in 2020. Late yesterday, the board approved a new rule that seeks to expand the role and authority of county boards of election in the certification process. This new rule redefines the certification process to include, quote, reasonable inquiry into whether the results are complete and accurate. So what they did the other day is essentially the deeply Republican Georgia State Election Board has made it so that if they feel the vibes are off on the results of an election, they can halt and alter the certification process. This is why it's not enough that we win by 50.1%, you know? We need an overwhelming victory because we're fighting an uphill battle against people who are literally open about their intentions to overturn the election. The vote to adopt this new rule was, wow, 3-2. You'll never guess the names of the three who voted in favor of it. Janice Johnson, Rick Jaffares, and Janelle King. It seems that Trump was pressing it when he said these three members would fight for his victory. That this violates state law seems clear. The obligation of county boards to certify elections is mandatory and ministerial. Nothing in Georgia law permits individual members to interpose their own investigations or judgment into a largely ceremonial function involving basic math. For Trump, these legal niceties are beside the point. He wants to be able to pick and choose which election results are accepted based solely on the outcome. Remember, we literally have recorded audio of him from the 2020 election calling basically every local red official he could find in swing states saying, hey, where's the vote? Can you give me the votes? There's a number that I'm looking at right here of how many votes I got. Can you find a different number that is larger than the other number? Please? If the new rule survives the inevitable court challenge, Trump will have another powerful tool in his election subversion arsenal. If it is struck down, which seems more likely, he will claim to be the victim of biased judges and an unspecified conspiracy. We do have one thing on our side here, which is, unlike in 2020, we currently have Joe Biden in office. When all of this was happening back in 2020, you know, Donald Trump ultimately was he wasn't the ultimate authority in this because that's not how our system of checks and balances works necessarily, but obviously he had the power to put his thumb on the scale, and now, of course, he doesn't. The SCOTUS does. That's the trade-off. Exactly, Bat Canary. Now we have the president, but they have the Supreme Court. That's the trade-off. Well, technically they had the Supreme Court back then too, but the SCOTUS hadn't entered their like mega hyper partisan era back then. That they were keeping the mask on a little bit more back then. So, you know, the legislature, Congress is deadlocked. SCOTUS is all in on dictatorial nonsense, and Joe Biden is, I'm hearing this for the first time, a Democrat. So look, it's going to be a wacky election season, okay? It's going to be a wacky election season. I'm surprised Biden has not had the DOJ investigate it. He can't. That's not their authority. This is first up for challenge in the Georgia State Supreme Court. Can only be elevated above that after a process. It's already been a wacky election season. Yeah. Yeah. The larger lesson from this episode is how much more methodical Trump and his allies' approach to subvert the 2024 election is than in previous years. Do keep that in mind. They have spent the past 8 years filling every state office and every federal office they could with as many sympathizers as possible. The process of doing so has not been subtle. They have been transparently loading these, these state agencies with election deniers. They are getting ready. Rather than abandon election denialism, however, the GOP has embraced it. Rather than recoiling from the humiliating performance of its legal team, the Trump campaign is redoubling its efforts, but with an important modification. Unable to convince even conservative judges to reject the lawful actions of election officials, Republicans have spent the last 4 years replacing the election officials with election deniers. In an extreme example of personnel being policy, Republicans seek to change the outcome of elections by changing who counts the votes and certifies the elections. And yeah, I mean, that's what they're planning for Project 2025 as well, right? Like, fix the administrative state by just replacing everyone in it with loyalists. That's the game plan. It's not good. They're telling me it's very bad, actually. Okay, I want to offer a little bit more than information here. Nothing short of a complete, how do I phrase this in a way that won't get me clipped? These people need to be removed from power. At every level, local, state, and federal, everyone who is complicit in or intends to be complicit in this transparent attempt to end the democratic process, they all need to be out. They all need to be out. I think a lot of them should be fairly tried. I think that their behavior is seditious. I think it's treasonous. I think that they represent a greater threat to the United States than any enemy we have ever fought before, save the Confederacy. And the Confederacy is, let's be clear here, kind of seeing a bit of a revival in terms of political relevance with what they're doing now. You know, we're sort of seeing Confederacy too in terms of the whole split the country down the line. They need to go. We cannot have a functioning democracy when the other side is constantly filling the ranks with partisan assholes who don't care about process, who don't care about the law, who are only interested in putting in place people who will agree with them. Like, what democracy could survive this? You know? I don't think it's possible. I genuinely, it's like we wrote the Constitution, and the Constitution was meant to give us barriers to protect democracy. We built a big concrete wall, an iron wall, and we wrote a lot of rules about how you can treat that wall, what the wall can do, what it's supposed to do, how it can be handled, how it can be renewed, replaced, refurbished. But thanks to some quirk of the Constitution, probably because the Founding Fathers, while writing it, were busy writing their slaves at the time, they forgot to add in, there's nothing illegal about applying acid to the wall. Nothing at all. And I feel like what we're looking at right now is the Republicans are running up to the wall with big, PVC plastic barrels of acid, dumping it on the wall, running back. And we're pointing at that going, is that allowed? And yes. Yes, it technically is. There is nothing right now on the books, meaningfully, practically, that protects, or sorry, that allows you to prosecute people for engaging in this kind of systematic insurrectionary, undermining of democracy. There's nothing that's on the books that you can point to and go, oh, it's a violation of this or a violation of that. I think we should have written in something about the acid. I think we still need to. We need to be active warriors defending democracy. And this should be a shared goal, whether you're a liberal or a leftist. If you're a liberal and you think everything would be fine if it wasn't for the Republicans, God bless you. You wacky individual, you. If you're a leftist and you have higher ambitions than that, you still must understand you really don't want the fascists to win. Even leaving aside the fact that they want to do terrible, terrible things to this country and people outside of this country, we mustn't ignore the fact that it's actually really difficult to do leftist agitation in a fascist government. That is true, Thana. We are always the first ones to go. Who do you think the Nazis took out first? It was the communist, socialist, and union organizers, the very first ones to go, because they were the mobilized opposition. And YouTubers. Socialists, communists, YouTubers, and trade unionists. A lot of folks ended up going in the long run. In the immediate sense, we were the threat. They are a threat. So we have to win. If people in power are acting in bad faith, Rhino, no well-worded laws that we put in place beforehand can stop them. I used to be motivated by this reasoning, this like, well, if we go hard on them, they'll go hard on us. They'll go hard on us anyway. Trust me, they are not waiting for an excuse. They've already decided what they're going to do. They're writing policy plans for it, you know? If you are nice to fascists, they will not go nice to you in exchange. When they go low, we go low. When they go high, we go low.